Spring Security is one of the most mystifying application libraries known to developers. You can easily spend hours or even days attempting to implement and debug what you think should be a simple feature. Luckily for you, I'm here to demystify your experience with Spring Security and get you some experience and a cool portfolio project to show off on the way. After many months of design, development, recording, and editing, I've put together what I believe is the best and most straightforward full-stack Spring Security course on the internet. In this course, we'll be using all the latest versions of Spring Boot, Spring Security, and React. That way there will be no sight of deprecated methods throughout the course. With that being said, my name is Ethan. I go by Unknown Coder over on YouTube, and I'm currently a senior software engineer over at Ford Motor Company, and previously a full-stack software engineer, trainer, and mentor over at Reviture, where I gained a knack for helping and teaching new software engineers, and I hope to also teach you something as well. I had previously created a Spring Security login system back in 2023, and one of the most asked questions I got on that course was to expand it, add more features, and a larger front-end application where you could better see the use of role-based authentication. I took this question/request to heart and sat down to think about what I could build using Spring Security that would make a good example and portfolio project for you all. What I came up with was a course that will take you all the way through setting up your Spring Boot and React application from scratch, configuring simple authentication with sessions, and allowing users to interact with the backend through the React application. Then we'll set up different roles to allow access to the specific functionality and make custom front-end portals corresponding to each role on the backend. And then to wrap it all up, we will implement stateless expiring JWT authentication using Spring Security OAuth resource server to manage everything for us, along with refresh tokens to allow users to authenticate for up to 24 hours after their token expires. I settled on this project, a full-stack employee management system, because I thought it'd be a great portfolio project to show off your skills when you're done. At the end of the course, you have implemented a fully fledged front-end and back-end system that has been simplified and streamlined as much as possible to fit in all of the features and keep duplication and boilerplate code down as much as possible. This is the largest course I've ever put together, and it has been cram-packed with information and optimization as much as humanly possible to get this large amount of information out in front of you as quickly as possible. If you're watching this course on YouTube, welcome in and congratulations on finding one of the best free full-stack Spring Security resources on the web. I'm going to be uploading the course as a short series here on YouTube. Through this version of the course, anyone can freely watch as each chapter is uploaded to YouTube and follow along. I'll be showing every line of code as the course goes on. That way it's completely possible for anyone to sit down and watch the entire course for free. However, if you want full access to the course and the course materials up front, I am also providing a couple paid versions of the course to grant you that access. The first paid option will grant you immediate access to the entire course, along with the private resources from the course at a fixed price of $15 to the course tier channel membership. This also grants you access to any other courses currently released at the time of having an active membership. The second option will also grant you immediate access to the entire course and all of its resources at a price provided by Udemy. I will provide the link to the Udemy course in the description below, and I will also attempt to run as many promotions as possible on Udemy to help you save some money on the course. But ultimately, I will be allowing Udemy to price the course at what they believe it is worth. I will also be releasing a full-length video of the course 1 to 2 weeks after the final chapter is uploaded. No matter which option you choose to follow along with, I please ask you to leave a like on the course video that you do watch. It is a completely free way to support the hard work I put to put this project together for you all for free. And if you want to see upcoming courses and other software projects, I would highly recommend subscribing, because I try to upload programming videos at least twice a week. Now with that being said, let's go and hop into the first chapter of this course. In this chapter of the course, we'll introduce a project which you have already accomplished, as well as going over the prerequisite knowledge and tools you'll need to complete this course. After the prereqs, we'll go ahead and discuss the project requirements that I would like to achieve before going through a demonstration of the finished project. And finally, we'll set up a simple Spring Boot project with a simple REST API along with a skeleton React application using Vite. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the first section of the chapter, which is the prerequisites. Before we go over our requirements, let's go ahead and review the prerequisites you'll need before continuing on in this course. Since this course is more advanced, I expect you will either have all the prerequisites already met, or you will be capable of getting them met. In able to complete this course, you will need just a few technologies installed. Firstly, you will need Java version 17 or above installed to be able to develop in the latest version of Spring Boot. You can go ahead and use whatever version that you want, it just needs to be above 17. Next, in order to run and build an application, you will need Maven, or if you prefer Gradle and know how to use Gradle, you can also go that route. Either way, you need to ensure that you have a Java dependency manager / build tool installed and accessible via your path. For the front end, you'll need to have Node and NPM installed. We will be using Vite to generate our React application, which requires version 18 plus of Node, so make sure that you double check your Node version and have that version or higher. And then outside of Node and NPM, we'll also be using TypeScript, so it also doesn't hurt to ensure that you have TypeScript installed globally as well. And that should be everything that you need to get started with this course. As I mentioned, everything should probably already be installed on your machine or easy enough for you to get configured before moving on to the requirements section of the course, which is coming up next. Before we get into our finished project demonstration, let's go ahead and outline some of our required tools, technologies, and user stories. At this point, it should be pretty self-explanatory that we'll be using Java, Spring Boot, Spring Web, Spring Data JPA, Spring Security, and React. On top of these, we'll also be using an H2 database. This is just for ease of use for the course. You can replace this with any relational database system. From the front-end standpoint, we'll also be using Axios to help us simplify our API calls, and I'm also doing a trial run on Font Awesome icons. Normally, I use Material UI icons, however, I wanted to try out Font Awesome because they seem to have loads more free to use icons. From a tool standpoint, you will need the basics, a Java IDE, which could be IntelliJ, Eclipse, STS, or even VS Code. You'll of course also want a text editor to work on the React code. Once again, you can use VS Code or whatever you like. Use the tools that you're comfortable with here. And since we are using a H2 database, we'll be able to connect to the database directly via our web browser. However, if you're using a different relational database management system, you'll want to either have a general purpose database tool such as dbeaver, or you prefer a database connection tool for the database you are running. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at our user stories for the project. We will be breaking our user stories down into 3 tiers of employees, the least privileged employee being the employee type, and the most privileged being the admin type, with the manager type being in the middle. There will also be shared functionality across all 3 of our employee tiers, which we'll go over first and then dive into the role-specific features. As any employee type, I should be able to log into my dashboard, I should be able to view my personal information, I should be able to view my pay information, I should be able to view my contact information, update my contact information, I should be able to refresh my session after timeout, and finally I should be able to log out to end my session. Next, as an admin type, I should be able to view every employee, I should be able to create new employee accounts, update an employee's personal information, and update their pay information, review this week's payroll, as well as run this week's payroll. Next, as a manager type, I should be able to view all employees that report to me, view all employees that report to me's timesheets, and also approve or deny a report's timesheet. Finally, as a regular employee, I should be able to reset my password on the first login attempt, I should be able to view my current timesheet, and view any denial reasons on my timesheet, then I should be able to update my timesheet and submit that timesheet for approval. So that should go ahead and be all of the requirements that we're going to go over. I know I went over them a little bit quickly there, but you can go back through and just double look or whatever. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the project in its entirety before getting into building it. We are in the web browser. We have our application open and running. When you first open the application, you'll be met with the login page. From here, you can log in with any employee type. We'll start out by logging into the admin role. So let's go ahead and see if I can type this correctly. Admin employee at company.com. If this does not log in properly, I'll go ahead and paste in the email. I might have spelled it wrong. Let's go and try to log in. There we go. So now we can go ahead and see that once we are logged in, we'll be brought into the employee role portal. From the admin portal, you'll immediately be able to see a list of all the employees that work at the company. Right now, there's only 2. We also go ahead and exclude the currently logged in admin because we don't want them to be able to update their own information. If you go ahead and click on the add employee button, a mode will pop up with a form for the admin to fill out and create an employee. Let's go ahead and create a new employee. So for the first name, we'll go ahead and put employee. Employee. We'll go ahead and put 2 for the last name. Contact number, we'll just put 4. So we need 123, 123, 1234. 4. There we go. For the employee type, we'll keep employee. Reports to will be manager, employee, and then at company.com. Company.com. Hourly is fine, and then the pay rate, let's just put $27.50. When the create new employee button is clicked, it'll go ahead and generate a new employee with the temporary password for the employee to log in and use. So let's go ahead and copy this temporary password and email. That way I have it ready for whenever we log into this account. Now we can go ahead and close out of this. You can see that the new employee showed up here. The employee table on the portal is actually interactable. If you simply click on a row, you'll be able to go ahead and view the user's information or the employee's information. And if you click on the pin icon in the edit column, it will expand the row to allow you to edit the employee's personal information and their pay information. Let's go ahead and update the first employee's name to be employee 1. So it already is. So let's go ahead and say first employee actually. So first employee, like so. And then if we go ahead and update information, you can go ahead and see that their information got changed to first employee. And then also go ahead and give them a raise to $30 an hour. So we can go ahead and come over here to pay amount, put in 30 and update pay, and that'll go ahead and do that. Now we can go ahead and close out this since we're done editing. And since the admin employee is an employee type, they are also able to go ahead and view their own information by clicking on the manage self page link on the navigation bar. Here you'll be able to see the admin's personal information, their contact information, and their pay information, along with any previous pay stubs from the past year. We haven't generated any pay stubs for him, so you can't see any here. In the contact information card, you're also able to go ahead and click on the edit button right here to update their own contact information. Let's go and open this, and let's say the admin recently moved, so they need to update their address. We can do this by clicking on the edit button, and then you'll be able to put in new information. So let's go ahead and say they moved to 345 and Promotion Lane, and then address line 2, they got a new penthouse apartment, APT, we can say 102 or something. Now if we go ahead and click on update contact information, the information is going to go ahead and be there. Now let's go ahead and log out of the admin, which will go ahead and invalidate the employee's login and navigate us back to the login page, just like that. Now let's go ahead and log into that new employee's account and take a look at what they can do in the portal. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste the email and password here. So we'll go ahead and pass in the employee2@company.com. We'll also go ahead and paste in that password that got generated for them. Go ahead and log in. You can see the very first time that they log in, they're going to be asked to reset their password. So let's go ahead and just put in PASS and PASS for the password to make it a little bit easier on us. Let's go ahead and reset password. And now once you have reset your password, you're going to go ahead and be redirected to the employee portal. Here you'll be able to see the employee's personal information once again, their contact information, and their pay information with this year's past pay stubs. Similarly to the admin employee, you're also able to update the employee's contact information by clicking the edit button as well. So let's go ahead and click that. And since we are just hired, let's go ahead and add in our address. So here we're going to put in 999 hourly road. We'll go ahead and say address line 2 is APT 123. City, we're going to go ahead and put Grindville. We're going to go ahead and put Texas since that's where I live. So put Texas. And then go ahead and put 9875. And there we go. I've missed a 6, but that should be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a valid zip code. Well, it's not valid, but it has 5 digits. Now we can go ahead and click update contact information, and you'll be able to see that that information got set up. Now the primary functionality of the employee will be found whenever you click on the timesheets link in the navigation bar. Here in the timesheet portal, the employee will see their current timesheet and the hours that they have accrued this week. The employee can come in and input the number of hours that they worked on each day and see the total number of hours on the right side of the table. So let's go ahead and put in that they worked 8 hours on Monday, 8 hours on Tuesday, 8 on Wednesday, 8 on Thursday, and 8 on Friday. You can go and see that says 40. So once the employee is ready to save their hours, then go ahead and click on Save Timesheet Changes. And then that'll go ahead and change the current status of the timesheet is saved. And then once it's time to submit their timesheet for approval, then go ahead and click on the Submit Timesheet for Approval button here. And then you can go ahead and see the current timesheet status has changed from saved to submitted. Now that the employee has filled out their timesheet, let's go ahead and pretend that they walked away from the computer and their session is timed out. So let's go ahead and wait for the timeout pop-up to appear here. When they come back to the computer, they will see a pop-up stating their session has timed out, and they can either re-authenticate or log in. If they choose to re-authenticate, a refresh token will generate a new JWT, and the employee will stay logged in. We currently have the backend configured to allow the employee to refresh their session for up to 24 hours. And if they log out, it'll go ahead and clear everything out and log them out. So let's go ahead and say that we're done here and let's log out. It'll navigate us back to the company login page. Now let's go ahead and log into the first employee's account to fill out their timesheet. So go ahead and say first employee at company.com. And if it doesn't let me in, I probably spelled something wrong. Let's go and say PASS and log in. So here we can actually see that they have year-to-date earnings and some pay stubs, so it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and go to our timesheets and let's go ahead and fill out a timesheet with 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. And let's say they tried to work some overtime on Saturday. Go ahead and save the timesheet hours and go ahead and submit for approval. So it looks good. Let's go ahead and log out now and focus on what the manager can do. So now back at the company portal, let's go and log into the manager. So this will be manager and then employee at company.com and put in PASS and log in. So now whenever you log into the manager account, you'll be navigated to the manager portal where you'll first see all the employees that report to you. Similar to the admin employees account, you can click on individual employees to go ahead and see more information about them. But since you're only a manager, you only have access to view their contact information. The most important duty of the manager is to review timesheets of the employees. So you can go ahead and view the currently submitted timesheets by clicking on the employee timesheets button on the navigation bar. Here you'll see a list of all the currently submitted timesheets and the options to either approve or deny the timesheets. Let's go ahead and approve the timesheet for employee 2. So let's go ahead and find employee 2. It looks like they've only worked 40 hours, so let's go ahead and approve that. But it seems like the first employee has done overtime. So right now overtime is not allowed. So let's go ahead and click on the big red deny button. And then we'll go ahead and enter a reason for denial. So we'll go ahead and say no overtime this week. And we'll go ahead and submit reason for denial. On top of being able to view the reporting employees and reviewing the timesheets, just like all the other employee types, the manager can click on the manage self page link on the navigation bar to view information about themselves, including their personal information, their contact information, and their pay information and pay stubs. Similarly to all the other employee types, you can also go ahead and click on the edit to edit your own contact information while inside the manager's manager self page. Since we've already seen updating contact information in other scenarios, let's go ahead and sign out and sign back into the first employee to resubmit a timesheet without overtime. So let's log out. Let's go ahead and say first employee at company.com and then PASS. Let's go and log in. Once again, we can go to our timesheets. Now you can see that the status is denied and we have a reason for denial that says that the overtime is not allowed this week. Let's go ahead and just remove that overtime, put that back down to 40 hours. We can go ahead and save and then resubmit that timesheet. Now let's go ahead and log out once again and re-log into the manager to approve this timesheet and make sure everyone gets paid. So let's log out. Let's hop into the manager employee at company.com. Go ahead and put in PASS and log in. Now we can go ahead and go back to employee timesheets. We can see that they don't have any hours on Sunday or Saturday. So we can go ahead and click approve and that looks good. Now let's go ahead and log out once again. And we need to go ahead and take a look at previewing and running their weekly payroll. So let's log out. Let's go and log into the admin employee at company.com. and go ahead and put in PASS and log in. Now inside the admin's portal page here, we can go ahead and see under the manage employees card, we'll see the payroll card with 2 buttons. It'll have a preview payroll and run payroll. Let's first just preview the payroll and make sure everything looks good and correct. So we go ahead and click on this button. You can see that a bunch of fake pay stubs or mock pay stubs show up. We can go ahead and see that the admin employee is going to get paid about $1,500, manager about $1,900, employee 2 about $1,100, and first employee about $1,200. So now if everything looks correct, we can go ahead and run the payroll button. So we go ahead and click run payroll. You can go ahead and see a bunch of pay stubs get created. We have the hours worked, the regular hours worked, the overtime hours worked, and any overtime compensation. And that all adds up to the total pay. So now if we go ahead and open up our manage self page once again, you can see that now we have a pay stub in here. So that goes ahead and keeps track of that. Obviously, as you're working over the year, this would kind of accumulate. Since we are just testing this out today and it hasn't been that many pay stubs, we don't have that many year to date. But that should go ahead and be everything that we have. Once again, we can sit here and wait. Let's go ahead and pretend like the admin has walked away once again, and that whenever they come back, they will see the timeout pop up. As you can see, our timeout pop up once again opened up. Now let's go ahead and say that they're not done and they want to go ahead and re-authenticate. So let's go ahead and click re-authenticate. Now, if we go ahead and go to manage employees, you can see all the stuff is still getting fetched. If we go back to manage self, all the stuff's getting fetched. So it's still making requests to grab this information and we are still authenticated. So that's going to go ahead and do everything that we need. So let's go ahead and log out one last time and let's go ahead and get to work on the project. Now let's go ahead and head over to start.spring.io to go ahead and configure our starter Spring Boot application. Here we will be using Maven as a dependency manager and build tool. Of course, we're going to be using Java, and then we're also going to go ahead and be using the latest long-term support version of Spring Boot. Now, if you're more familiar with like Gradle, you can go ahead and use that as well instead of Maven. And with this course, it should be more or less the same if you're using Gradle rather than Maven. The only difference is going to go ahead and be whenever we're adding new dependencies. Other than that, everything else should be the same. Next, let's go ahead and come down to our group here. Instead of com example, we're going to go ahead and put com.unknowncoder. You guys can put whatever you like. I'm just going to put this because it's my application. Then as the artifact, we're going to go ahead and put employee management service. Name is fine. We can go ahead and keep that as employee management service. And if you want to add a description, we can. So we go ahead and put something like this is the server side application for the employee management system. And then finally, we want to go ahead and make the package name just pom.unauthenticated. You guys can make this whatever you like. I just like it to be a little bit shorter. For the packaging, we're going to go ahead and use jar. And then for Java, I'm going to be using Java 21. That's just what I'm kind of familiar with, what I have installed. You guys can use 17 or 24, whatever you like. I'm just going to be using 21. If you don't have Java 21 installed or you don't have 17 or 24, unfortunately with Spring Boot, you're going to have to install one of those three. So just go ahead and choose one. I like to choose 21 in this instance. Next up is going to be our dependencies. We're going to be starting out bare bones and we're going to be adding onto the POM as we get going here. So let's go ahead and open up the dependencies to add some. The first dependency that we're going to go need is Spring Web. So let's go ahead and grab Spring Web. And then we're also going to go ahead and add Lombok. So Lombok. So this is going to go ahead and cut down on the boilerplate that we need in this course. And then if you like, you can also go ahead and add Spring Boot and then DevTools. So here, this is going to go ahead and disable caching during development and also restart the dev server when changes are made. However, with this one, your mileage may vary depending on what IDE you're using and other factors like that, but it is kind of nice just to have. Now with the basic project set up, let's go ahead and generate the project by clicking generate right here. This is going to go ahead and generate a zip folder with the generated project code inside of it. Now we're going to go ahead and just unzip it wherever you like. I'm going to put it on the desktop for now, and then we can open it up in the IDE of your choice. Now, normally I would be using a custom NeoVim instance. And if you guys are ready to switch over to something lighter, you can go ahead and watch my NeoVim tutorial that I have over on YouTube. Otherwise, you can use whatever you like. For this tutorial, however, I'm going to be using the industry standard IntelliJ. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in a second and we'll get to work here. And my goal for this first chapter of the course is just to get a basic API up and running and then consume that basic API with a skeleton front end. Let's go ahead and get started on setting up our backend, and then we'll add on to that throughout the rest of the course. Now that I have the project opened up in IntelliJ, we're going to go and open up our project. We're going to source main resources and then application.properties. Then let's go ahead and set up a couple of properties here. So the application name is fine. Next, what we want to go and do is set the server port. So we can set this to whatever you like. I'd normally like to set up like 8000. So let's go ahead and say server.port is equal to 8000. And then let's go ahead and save that. That should be good to go for now. Next, let's go ahead and get into the rest of our application here. So first we want to go ahead and make a new package in here. And we're just going to go ahead and call this entities like so. And then we want to go ahead and start setting up our first entities. So first we're going to go ahead and make a new and then Java class. We're going to go ahead and call this employee. And we're going to start out with a very basic employee entity here. And then as we move forward, we're going to be adding onto it. So let's go ahead and hop into our employee class. And let's just make a little bit of space here. Since we're going to be going ahead and using Lombok, let's go ahead and get started by adding in some annotations. First, we're going to go ahead and say add data. And then let's go ahead and make sure we bring in data from Lombok here. Next, we want to go ahead and bring in builder. Let's also go ahead and import builder really quick. The builder annotation is going to go ahead and set up a convenient builder method for us so we can more easily create our employee objects and other objects later on down the road. Next, we want to go ahead and set up our noargs constructor. This is going to go ahead and generate a no argument constructor for us. Nice and easy. Let's go ahead and import that. We're also going to go ahead and want an all args constructor, which is going to do the opposite and basically build a constructor with all arguments. And that should go ahead and be good. So now let's go ahead and hop into the employee class itself. Now inside, like I said, this is going to be very basic. The first thing we want to go ahead and start out with is setting up the first name. So let's go ahead and say private string first name. And then after first name, we want to go ahead and set up a private string last name as well. Next, for the unique identifying property, we're going to use their email. So let's go ahead and say private string email to set that up. And finally, to be able to log in, we're also going to go ahead and need a password property for this employee. So let's go ahead and set up a private string password as well. Again, this is still going to be just very basic, and we're not going to be encrypting this or anything in this episode. We'll get around to that once we get to our actual Spring security setup. Now, there is one more thing we want to go ahead and do above the password. So whenever we're logging in and passing employee data back and forth to the front end, we don't want to be including the employee's password. So to remedy this, we're going to go ahead and use a JSON ignore annotation above that password field. And then this is going to go ahead and just not include this property. And whenever we are making our API request, let's go ahead and import that. So this will go ahead and wrap up our employee model. Again, we're going to be updating this as we make the application more complex. But for now, this should enable us to get a simple REST API up and going to be able to log in, register, and then also fetch other employee information. Next, let's go ahead and open up our Explorer once again. And now we need to go ahead and set up the next layer to perform some basic business logic on these employee objects. To do this, let's go ahead and start out by making a basic employee service. So now what we need to go ahead and do is make a new pack. This is going to be called services. And then inside of services, we're going to go ahead and make a new Java class. And then this is going to be called employee service, like so. Let's go ahead and hop into our employee service. We'll go ahead and close out that as well to make it look a little bit nicer. Of course, since this is a service, at the top, we're going to go ahead and include @service annotation so that Spring knows to make this as a bean. We can go ahead and get inside here. Since we don't have a database to set up currently, we're just going to go ahead and just store these inside of like a pseudo database, more or less. And for our pseudo database, we're going to be using a map. So let's go ahead and say private map of string and employees. And then let's go ahead and import our employee from our entities and then also import our map as well. So that is good to go. We're just going to be kind of setting up and storing information about the employees in there. Whenever we load up, we'll put some in there. And then whenever we obviously call post requests and stuff like that, or pull requests, we'll update and add them. Good. Looks good. Go ahead and get started on the methods we're going to set up. The first letter in the CRUD stands for create. Let's go ahead and create a new public method, which creates and returns an employee object. So let's go ahead and say public employee create employee. Then inside of the parameter list, we're going to go ahead and pass in a string first name, a string last name, and a string password. We're going to go ahead and generate the email by ourselves inside of the actual method here. Let's hop inside the method. First thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and say string email is equal to. We're going to go ahead and set this equal to first name dot to lowercase. Then we want to go ahead and append last name dot to lowercase. Then we're going to go ahead and append @company.com. So this is going to be our very basic email. So keep in mind that this is going to be a very rudimentary way of generating these employee emails. And if two employees share the same exact name, there's going to go ahead and be a conflict with their unique login identifiers. So as an exercise after this chapter of the course is over, I would highly recommend thinking about how you might be able to kind of improve this logic, make it less likely to have a conflict in the future. But since this course isn't necessarily about making the best login, its main focus is more about Spring security in general. Email logic is going to go ahead and do for now. Let's actually create the employee object. We'll start out by declaring employee. Now we're going to take advantage of our builder object by saying employee.builder. And then we're going to go ahead and go through and build our employee. First, we'll go ahead and say first name is equal to first name that we passed in. Then we'll say last name is equal to last name that we passed in. Next, we'll say email is equal to the email that we generated above. Then we'll say the password is equal to the password that was passed into the method. And finally, we'll call the .build method to go ahead and build the employee object. Now we have our employee object that we wanted to create. So let's go ahead and actually store it in our makeshift database. Now to do this, we're going to go ahead and call employees.put email and employee, and that should go ahead and store that. And then finally, we'll go ahead and return that employee. So that's going to be the C from our CRUD that'll go ahead and store that first employee. Now the next letter in the CRUD acronym is R, which stands for read. So now we want to go ahead and set up a couple of different methods to be able to read the employees from our hash map. The first one we want to go ahead and set up is a simple read all the employees that are stored. To do this, let's set up a public method that will return a list of employee objects. So let's say public list of employee, and we'll call it read all employees. Let's go ahead and import our list right here so it's not mad at us. That looks good. Let's go ahead and hop in here. Since we're going to be returning all of them, we don't need to pass in any method parameter. Let's just hop straight into the method body itself. What we're going to want to do in here is basically go through all the values inside the employee map. So first we'll go ahead and say return employees.values. Then we're going to use the .stream method to go ahead and stream through the list of values. And finally, we'll go ahead and terminate the stream with .toList to collect these into a list. That'll go ahead and get all of our employees and return it to us. So let's go ahead and come below this one, because being able to return the entire list of employees is nice, but it's not as useful as being able to select an individual employee, especially for tasks like logging in. So as another operation in the read family, we can go ahead and set up to read an employee by the unique login identifier, which is their email. To do this, once again, we'll go ahead and create a public method. This one's just going to return an employee. So let's go ahead and say public employee read employee by email. Let's go ahead and open this up. Now, of course, since we want to go ahead and read this one by email, we're going to need to pass in a parameter. Our parameter is going to go ahead and be a string email. And then inside of the method itself, first thing we want to do in here, we want to check to see if the employee even exists in our map. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and say if not employees dot contains key, and then the key that we want to go ahead and check for is the employee's email. So it looks good. Let's go ahead and hop inside of our if statement, and in here, if the employee doesn't exist, we want to go ahead and throw a custom exception that we can go ahead and be handled by our controller in the next step. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and come back into our Explorer, and once again, we're going to go ahead and create a new package. We're going to go ahead and call this exceptions. Then inside the package, we're going to go ahead and create a new Java class. We're going to go ahead and call this employee does not exist exception, like so, and go ahead and hop into here. And now inside of our employee does not exist exception, the first thing we need to go and do is make sure that this extends runtime exception. And that looks good. Now we're going to come inside and we need to make a couple of constructors. The first constructor we'll go ahead and just do a no args constructor. So public employee does not exist exception. And inside, I just want to go ahead and call this super method. And inside of super, we'll go ahead and just say employee does not exist. So it looks good. Let's go ahead and come below this. We want to go ahead and set up another employee does not exist exception constructor. So public employee does not exist. This constructor should take in a string message. Let's come inside. Once again, we'll go ahead and call super. And inside super, we'll go ahead and pass in that message. So that should go ahead and do it for our employee does not exist exception. Let's go ahead and close out of this, and we're going to hop back into our employee service. And so now if our employees map does not exist our employee, we're going to go ahead and throw new employee does not exist exception. And then let's go ahead and make sure we import this guy. That looks good. And then let's come below our if. So then if it does exist, we can go and just return the employee. To return the employee, all we need to go and do is say return employees.get and then pass in their email. So that will go ahead and read the employee by their individual email. So it is looking good. The next letter in CRUD is U for update. So now we want to go ahead and set up a method to update a specific employee that's stored in our application. To do this, we once again want to go ahead and create a new public method. This one's just going to return an employee again. So let's go ahead and create public employee update employee. Since we are making some changes and updating the employee, this is of course going to need a couple of parameters. For the parameters, we're going to go ahead and pass a string email and an employee updated. Let's go ahead and open up the method here. So the reason that we need to go and pass in the original email is because it's possible that we changed the email inside of the updated employee object. And if we were to try to find the employee by the updated email, it wouldn't have found that one. So that's why we need to set up that way. Now, similar to the find employee by email, we need to check to see if the employee actually exists again. Once again, to do this, we'll use an if statement and check for employees does not contain the key. And once again, we're searching for the employee by the email. Let's go ahead and hop into the if statement. If we don't find the employee to update in the map, we'll once again throw a new employee does not exist exception. And when the employee does not exist that we're attempting to update, we're going to go ahead and pass in a custom message which states that the employee that we're trying to update does not exist. As long as it does exist, we can go ahead and continue working. Next, we want to go ahead and declare a new employee variable that we'll go ahead and just call persisted. After this, we need to go ahead and set up some logic to store and or update employee's key in the map. We'll go ahead and set up an if statement that checks to see if the email is not equal to the updated email. If this is the case, that means that the original email is different from the email stored inside of the updated employee object. Then we need to update the employee and the key which we'll get the employee by. So first we want to go ahead and remove the employee object from the map by using employees.remove and pass in the original email. So I'll go ahead and get rid of that original one. Then we want to go ahead and call employees.put. Inside the put, we want to use the updated.getEmail property. And we'll go ahead and store the updated employee value. This part might not be necessary, but now that we have that updated employee stored in the map, we're going to go ahead and say persisted is equal to employees.get. And we're going to go ahead and get the updated.getEmail. And then that looks good. Now we're going to go ahead and say otherwise. And then inside the else, we simply want to replace the value related to the email keys object. To do this, let's go ahead and set persisted to employees.replace. Inside the replace, we're going to pass in email and update. So we're going to find the employee by the email, then replace it with the updated employee. Finally, outside of our conditional logic, we're going to go ahead and just return that new persisted employee that we updated. That is our update. Of course, this method had a little bit more logic in it to be able to handle an employee's email getting changed since it's their identifier, but overall, that one wasn't too bad either. either. Final letter of CRUD is D, which stands for delete. Now we're going to go ahead and create a new method that allows us to delete an employee from our database map. To do this once again, we're going to go ahead and create a new public method. This one's going to actually turn a void. Let's go ahead and say public void delete employee. We're going to delete employees by their email. So we want to go ahead and pass in a string email inside of our method parameters. Let's go ahead and open up the method. Inside, we're going to go ahead and say employee deleted employee is equal to employees.remove. We want to pass in that email to remove the employee by the email. Next, we want to add a check to make sure an employee was actually deleted. To do this, let's go ahead and say if deleted employee is equal to null. If this is the case, we're going to go ahead and throw a new employee does not exist exception because we didn't find an employee. And inside the exception constructor, we're going to go ahead and pass that the employee that we're trying to delete does not exist. Otherwise, we're just not going to return anything, and that should go ahead and do it for our delete functionality. This will go ahead and wrap up all of the CRUD functionality for our service layer for our simple employees service. And now before we finally wrap up the entire employee service here, there is one more final functionality that I want to go and add. And this is purely a utility functionality to make our lives a little bit easier while attempting to test out our features as we add them. So I want to go and add a method which will generate or load in user data for our database when the application starts up. To do this, we're going to go ahead and say public void load employee data. So they're going to take in any parameters. All we're going to go ahead and do is come inside. We're going to go ahead and declare employees is equal to a new hash map. Let's go ahead and make sure we bring in hash map here. And then below here, we're going to go and start putting in some new employees. So to do that, let's go ahead and call employees.put. Inside the first put, we're going to go ahead and create admin employee. So we're set the email to adminemployee@company.com. Then we want to go ahead and call employee.builder to go ahead and create a new employee. We will set the admin's first name to admin, set their last name to employee. Their email will be set to adminemployee@company.com. The password is to be set to pass. And finally, we'll go ahead and build our admin employee. And then that'll go ahead and do it for the first one. Now we need to add a couple more. So let's once again call employees.put. Inside this put, the key will be manager employee@company.com. We want to call employee.builder again. The first name of this employee will be manager. Last name will be employee. Email will be manager employee@company.com. Password will be pass again. And once again, we'll call build. Finally, we want to go ahead and generate one of our regular employees. One final time, let's go ahead and say employees.put. Inside the put, we'll put the email as employee1@company.com for the key. We'll call employee.builder. Set first name to employee. Last name to 1. Email will be employee1@company.com. Password will be pass as well. And finally, we will build that employee as well. So that is 3 employees put into our map here or our database. And then that will go ahead and wrap up our entire functionality for our employee service. Let's just make sure that is saved and all good to go. The next what we'll go ahead and do is set up our employee controller logic and then be able to actually make API calls. Now that we have our employee service all set up, we need a means to actually communicate with our services. The way to do this is to set up a controller and different endpoints to hit on our backend service. So let's go ahead and set up a controller for our employees logic. To do this, we're going to first go ahead and create a new package. And this is going to go ahead and be called controllers. And then inside of this controller package, we're going to make a new Java class. We're going to go and call this employee controller like so. Let's go and open up our employee controller here. Similar to our service class, we need to set up some annotations so Spring knows it is a special class and should be treated as a controller. The first annotation that we should add is the REST controller annotation. And this will tell Spring to make this class a REST controller bean. So let's go ahead and bring in REST controller. Next, we want to go ahead and add the annotation @request mapping. And we're going to go ahead and bring this in. We'll go ahead and add in some parentheses. We want to go and add the route we want to map this controller to. So in the parentheses, we're going to go ahead and say /employee. This will basically tell Spring Boot to direct any API requests that are looking for the resource /employee to be handled by this class. Now, we also want to go ahead and set up some core stuff. So next, we want to go ahead and add the @cores annotation here. Inside of the @cores annotation, we're going to go ahead and set the origin. So we're going to say origins is equal to http://localhost 5713. And this is basically going to go and tell Spring to allow access to our front end because our front end is going to be on a localhost server on port 5713. And this is going to not block us basically, because if we don't let this happen, Spring is basically going to say, hey, I don't know this server. Are we allowed to talk to one another? And yes, we are. So we're going to go and set up that server or that origin. If you want to set it up for everything, you can as well, but it's kind of more secure just to set up for the specific server or servers that you're going to be talking to. So now below our cross origin, we need to go ahead and set up some of our long block annotations. Specifically, we need to go ahead and tell Spring Boot that this is going to have some dependencies that we want to auto wire. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and use the required args constructor, which is basically just going to auto wire all of our dependencies for us instead of having to put auto wired above each one or above a constructor. So that looks good. And this is actually a nice addition. The last time I believe that I did one of these, this didn't exist and we had to wire it up ourselves, and it's still kind of annoying and ugly. So it's nice that this exists now. So now we're ready to go ahead and hop into a controller and get to work here. The first thing we need to do inside of our controller is grab our dependencies so we can actually perform the logic in our endpoints. Right now, all we need access to is the employee service. So let's go ahead and set up a private final employee service. And we'll just go ahead and call this employee service. And once again, the required args constructor will handle importing this for us. Let's also go and import the class as well, so it looks good. So now we can go ahead and start setting up our methods to actually handle the logic whenever we get hit with an endpoint API call. So once again, we're going to go ahead and go down the CRUD functionality. So the first one is create, obviously. So let's go ahead and create a public employee post employee. Let's go ahead and import our employee class here. And for now, we're just going to go ahead and return null. That way it's not yelling at us. Now that it's not mad at us, let's go ahead and set up some annotations. Above the post employee method here, we want to go ahead and set up a post mapping. And this is going to basically tell Spring Boot to allow post request to a specific endpoint to be handled by this specific method. And inside the post mapping, we're going to map this to slash. So basically any post request that goes to http://localhost 8000/employee/ is going to be handled by this function here, or this method. Let's go ahead and save that. Before moving forward with the create employee logic, we actually need to set up a simple way to send request data to the method so we can create the employee. So this is a great place to use a DTO or a data transfer object. Let's go ahead and open up our Explorer once again, and let's make a new package. And we're going to go ahead and call this DTO. And inside of our DTO, we're going to go ahead and create a new class. And we actually want this to be a record. And we're going to go ahead and call this create employee request and open that up. Above our record, we're going to go ahead and add the @builder just in case we ever need to build this. We might not here, but maybe you want to some other time. And then inside of our record itself, we want to go ahead and pass in a string first name, a string last name, and a string password to be able to create our employee. So that's going to go ahead and do it for our create employee request. Now we can go ahead and close out of this, close out of Explorer, and come back in to our post employee method parameters. Inside of our method parameters, we first want to go ahead and call @requestBody. This is going to allow us to go ahead and pass in information in the post request. And for the request body, we want to go ahead and pass in a create employee request, which we'll call body. Let's go ahead and import this create employee request. So looks good. And now we can go ahead and delete this return because we're going to set up a new return. Instead of returning null, we're going to go ahead and return employee service.create employee. Now this is going to require our first name, last name, and password. Let's go ahead and pass in body.firstname, body.lastname, and body.password. So being able to just call it body dot is the nice thing about records. You don't have to create getters and setters. You can go ahead and just call the actual parameter or the property that you want like this, and it'll pass it for you. So that's why we used a record there. So that looks good. That's going to go ahead and do it for creating an employee. So next we want to go ahead and handle the read portion of our CRUD functionality. So the first thing we need to set up is a request handler for reading all the employees saved to our mock database. So this will go ahead and declare a public method that returns a list of employees, and we'll go ahead and call this get all employees. Let's make sure we go ahead and import our list here and java.util. There we go. And then we're going to open up this method. Since we're just getting all the employees, we're just reading them all. We don't need to worry about passing in any parameters. Let's go ahead and set up the annotations above it first. Since we're just reading the employees, we're not creating them, we're going to go ahead and use @getMapping. This time we're going to go ahead and do the slash. So this is going to go ahead and make a GET request to http://localhost 8000/employee/, and that'll go ahead and return all of the employees for us inside of the method. All we need to go ahead and do is just return the employees that we get from the employee service. So we're going to go ahead and call return employee service.read all employees. And that'll go ahead and pass back all of those to our person making the API request. That looks good. The other read functionality is to be able to read an employee specifically by the email. So let's go ahead and set up a public employee get employee by email. Above this method, we're going to set up a get mapping to /email /curly braces email. So this is going to allow us to pass in what's called a path variable at the end of our request here. So whenever we make a get request, we'll go ahead and make the get request as /employee /email, and then also pass in that specific employee's email after email, and that'll search for them. So to actually set up this path variable, let's come into the method parameters here. And inside the method parameters, we want to go ahead and use an @path variable annotation. Let's go ahead and bring that in. And then after the path variable annotation, we're going to add a set of parentheses with email, and that's going to match up with the path variable. And then we'll store this path variable in a variable called string email. Let's go and open up the method here. Inside the method, we simply want to go ahead and return employee service.read employee by email. And then we'll pass in that email from our path variable, and that should find it for us. So that's looking good. So that is both of our read operations all set up and good to go. The next of our CRUD operations is going to be update. So let's go ahead and create a method to deal with that. Here we're going to go ahead and create a public employee put updated employee. We're once again going to need a custom object here to handle this request. So for now, let's go ahead and return null so it's not mad at us, and then save. And then we need to go ahead and create a record to be able to actually pass in data to update the employee. So once again, let's go and go into our project, our DTO, and we're going to go ahead and create a new Java class. It's going to be a record, and we're going to go ahead and call this update employee request. Let's go ahead and open this up. Once again, above the record, we're going to go ahead and add the app builder annotation. Let's go ahead and bring that in. We might not use it in this episode or this chapter or this course, but you might use it some other time. And inside the record, we're going to go ahead and pass in the string email and the employee. Here we're going to go ahead to import the employee, but that is fine. And that should be good to go. So now we can go ahead and close out of our record here. We should be able to actually update our employee now. So now back inside of our controller here, above our put updated employee, we want to go ahead and annotate this with @put mapping. Go ahead and import that. Inside the put map, we're going to go ahead and map this to employee /, and then any put request that goes to employee / will go ahead and be handled by this. Inside of our method parameters, we want to go ahead and pass in the @request body annotation again. That way we can pass in a request body. And this time around, our request body is going to be an update employee request, which we'll go ahead and call body. Let's make sure we go ahead and import our record here. And now we should be able to handle actually updating the employee. Let's go ahead and get rid of this return null. And instead, we're going to go ahead and call employee service.update employee. And inside of our update employee method, we're going to go ahead and pass in the body.email and the body.employee. That'll go ahead and set up the ability for us to actually update an employee on our backend. And then the final functionality of our CRUD is delete. So once again, let's go ahead and create one more new method that's going to be a public response entity delete employee. We need to go ahead and import our response entity. It's going to be mad at us because we don't have a type parameter here, but that's fine because this is going to return no content, so it doesn't matter. Above our delete employee, we're going to go ahead and use the @delete mapping annotation. Let's go ahead and make sure that's imported. And we're going to go ahead and map this to /curly braces email. So this is also going to take in a path parameter similar to our get employee by email. This time it's going to be delete request to /employee/ and then their email will actually delete the employee. Inside the method parameters, we want to go ahead and pass path variable with that email. And we'll go ahead and store this in a string email as well. Let's go and open up our method here. Inside delete method, all we need to do is call employee service.delete employee with that email, and that'll go ahead and delete it or throw our exception there. Below our employee service.delete email, we want to return response entity. Then we'll call .noContent and we'll call .build. Now to go ahead and set up our response entity that doesn't have any content because we have nothing to return since we just deleted the employee basically. Now that's everything we need to do to set up like the CRUD functionality. But if you recall, we set up a special exception to be thrown if you're attempting to mess with employees that don't exist. So now we also want to actually set up the custom exception handler for this custom employee does not exist exception. To do this, we want to go ahead and declare a public response entity of type string, and we'll call this handle employee does not exist. Above, we're going to annotate with @exception handler. Let's go ahead and make sure we bring this in. And inside of the @exception handler annotation, we're going to go ahead and say employee does not exist exception.class. We need to go and import our employee does not exist exception. And now anytime an employee does not exist exception gets thrown, it's going to be handled by this controller endpoint, and it's going to return a response for us. To this, let's go ahead and return response entity. We're going to call .status is 400 and .body says unable to handle request at this time. There we go. That should go ahead and basically do it for the entirety of our employee controller for now. All we have left to do for the backend at this point is setting up the ability to load in our 3 employees whenever the application starts up. And then we should be able to test out the API on Postman. To be able to load in data at startup, we need to navigate to our main application class, which is this employee management service application right here. And then inside of this class, we want to go ahead and set up a new command line run method. And we might need to go ahead and import command line runner. So let's go ahead and import that. That looks good. Above the command line runner, we want to go ahead and annotate this with @bean, which is going to go ahead and tell Spring to generate this as a bean whenever we start up. And then inside of the method parameters of the run method, we want to go ahead and also pass an employee service. We'll call employee service. This will get automatically wired for us, so that is fine. So now let's hop into the actual method here. Inside the method, we want to return an args lambda function. And inside the lambda function, we want to go ahead and call employee service.load employee data. And that'll go ahead and basically whenever we start up the application, it's going to go ahead and generate those 3 employees for us and then put them inside that map. That way we can mess around with them. So now let's go ahead and see if the application wants to run. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the big green arrow on the side here. I'm sure you guys have probably used IntelliJ or something similar to IntelliJ. We need to enable annotation processing. That's fine because it's the first time we opened up this project in IntelliJ. And then fingers crossed I didn't typo anything. There's a good chance I could have forgotten something just because there's so much going on here, but it looks like we're good to go. So now with all that being done, we can go ahead and hop into Postman where I have some collections set up and we can go ahead and go through all of our CRUD functionality and make sure everything works before hopping into VS Code to generate and set up our skeleton frontend project. Now let's hop into Postman and make sure we're able to make the request and get the data that we expect back. I've taken the liberty to create a Postman collection for those who have decided to pay for the full course, and those who are not will stop before each request to allow you to see the request and how it's set up in Postman. That way you can set them up for yourselves. We'll start out with the simplest request to test, which is going to be the read all employees. So this is going to be a GET request that goes to http://localhost 8000/employee/. As I mentioned, I'll pause for a second here for you all that are not paying for the course. And then we'll go ahead and run the request. Whenever we run it, we should see that our backend passed back 3 of our employees that got generated automatically. So that is looking good. Next up, we can go ahead and read a specific user by their email. So this request will go to http://localhost 8000/employee/whatever the employee's email is. So here we can see we have admin employees set up here. Let's go ahead and take a quick second to pause on this one. So now if we go ahead and run this, you can go and see that the employee exists and we get it back. But if we went ahead and updated this email to something that doesn't exist, so if we just go ahead and maybe say admin instead of admin employee, we should go ahead and get back a 400. Then it says you cannot handle this request at this time. So it looks good. Go ahead and undo that update. And then we can sit in again. We can see once again, we get back that entire employee object. So next, let's go and attempt to create a new employee. So here, this is going to go be a post request to http://localhost 8000/employee/. And once again, you can see it's only a slash, but this one is going to be a post request. So that's going to be how we distinguish it. The post requests are going to go and take in a body that we set up previously, that record. So this needs a first name of employee. Set last name is going to be 2 and then password be pass. Let's go ahead and pause here so you guys can see the request as well as the body that we passed in. Now, if we go ahead and hit submit, you go and see that we get a new employee object back. And if we actually go back to read all and run again, you should see now we have more employees. Seems like, oh, there it is. I was going to say it doesn't look like it created it or we put in the wrong information, but you can see employee 2 and so on and so forth. So that looks good. Now that we've created a new employee, let's go ahead and take a look at the other request, which takes in a body. And this is going to be the update employee. So this request is going to be a put request to http://localhost 8000/employee/. Once again, here, even though it's just a slash, it's going to be looking at the request type. So since it's a put, it's going to go and update the employee. This one is also going to take in a body. So here we have the original email, and we can also go ahead and update anything that we want. So here we can say, for example, employee and then 1. Now this would be employee 1. employee@company.com. If we go ahead and send this, we should be able to see that this updated their email and password. And then not their email and password, this updated their email and information. If we go to read all again, now we should go ahead and see employee 1 instead of first employee. And then the last thing that we can go ahead and do is delete the employee. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So once again, this is going to be a delete request to http://localhost 8000/employee. Then this is going to take in the employee's email. So here we actually called this employee or first employee, I believe. And let me go ahead and double check that. So we uploaded. Actually, we set it back to employee 1. This should have been to first employee. Let's go ahead and make this first and then employee. I had it correct the first time. And then this will go ahead and be first employee at company.com. Let's go ahead and save that. And now let's say that they did something bad and we're going to basically fire them. So if we go ahead and send this, you can see we get no content back, but it's a 204. If we try to send it again, they're not going to exist. So now it says a 400. Now if we read all, the first employee should be missing, but we do have employee 2 here. So that is looking good. Now we can see that our API is working as expected. Let's go and set up a very basic React application before wrapping up this first chapter of the course. To create a React application, I went ahead and opened up VS Code in the folder that we're going to be working in for our project. And I also went ahead and opened up a terminal. To do this, you can use Control-tilde, or if you're on Mac, I'm not sure exactly what that maps to. But I opened up the terminal here inside of our employee management folder. You can see that we have our Java project here. We're going to ignore that inside of VS Code. That's fine. And we want to go ahead and generate a React application using Vite. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and use npm create v at latest employee management app -- and then -- template react -ts. We're going to go ahead and hit enter and run this. We're going to go ahead and say sure. We'll go ahead and install create Vite. That's fine. And we're going to go ahead. I'm not sure why it's asking us this. It should have been fine. But we're going to go ahead and create a React application. It's going to be TypeScript. I don't know what SWC stands for, but we're just going to use TypeScript here. Then we go ahead and cd into employee -management -app. Now we can say npm install like it says to do. And we're going to go install those dependencies really quick. Now that those are installed, we also have a few more dependencies that we want to install before we actually get into creating the application. So once again, it's going to say npm I. And then here, we're going to go ahead and pass in a few dependencies. The first one being @forAwesome /forAwesome SVG core. We're going to pass in @forAwesome /free brands SVG icons. We're going to install @forAwesome free solid SVG icons. We're going to install @forAwesome /react -font awesome. We need Axios. And finally, we need React Router DOM. So that's going to be everything here. @forAwesome is something called Font Awesome. Normally, I go ahead and use Material UI, but I wanted to kind of switch it up a little bit with the dependency that we use to grab icons and whatnot. So we'll see how it goes. I think they look pretty good. I was just experimenting here. So if you want to use something different or not use icons at all, be my guest. But let's go ahead and hit enter to install all these. And now we should be good to go here. So now let's go ahead and just close or make this a little bit smaller so we don't have to see what's going on here. So let's go ahead and open up our project and just start cleaning some stuff out. We don't need this Vite.svg. We don't need a lot of stuff in here. So assets, we can go ahead and get rid of this guy. Inside of app.tsx, we can go ahead and remove all of this. Inside of our index.css, we can also remove all of this as well. Looks good. And then inside of main, we should be good to go here. We don't need to touch this Vite. Inside of index.html, we can go ahead and make one small change. Inside the title, we can say employee and then management like so, and that should be good. Then also this SVG is gone, so we want to go and get rid of that so that way it doesn't break. And I think that's more or less everything we need to set up inside of here. And the first thing we want to go ahead and do is deal with our index.css. Basically, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to set up some global styles here that we can use across the entire application. And then it's going to make our lives a lot easier as we get going. The first thing we want to go ahead and do is set up the fonts inside of our CSS. To do that, we're going to go ahead and head over to Google Fonts. To do that, we'll go ahead and go to fonts.google.com. Let's open this up. We're going to go ahead and look for Poppins. So pop-ins, for some reason, it's in Arabic or whatever style this is. You can go ahead and put it into Latin if you like. It doesn't matter. We're going to go ahead and click on this get font. And then we should be able to kind of go into, but you can get embedded code. Here we go. You can see the styles. We can just grab all the styles. And then we're going to go ahead and grab the imports right here. We're going to go ahead and copy this imports like so, and then let's hop back into VS Code. Inside of VS Code, in the top of our index.css, we're going to go ahead and add that import. Looks good. Now that we have our font installed, we can go ahead and start working on kind of our global styles. First, we're going to go ahead and say :root to set up some dependencies, or not dependencies, some variables. The first variable we're going to set up is called --background, which is going to be F0, 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 which is going to be like a white color. Next, we're going to set up --foreground, which is going to be F2, 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 which is going to be also a light color. Then we're going to set up a --text primary, which is a dark black color. Then a --text secondary, which is going to be a light gray color. We're going to set up a --primary color, which is going to be a light blue. We're going to set up a --secondary color, which is going to be a green color. We're going to set up a --air red, which is a red color. Then --border color is going to be a little bit darker gray for the borders. We're going to set up a --box shadow, which is an RGBA, and then a box shadow. We're going to set this up that way we don't have to basically type this out every single time we want a box shadow on some things. Then we'll have a --border small, which is going to be 4px, which is basically the border radius. We're going to have a --border large, which will be 8 radius px. And that should be good for all of our variables. Now that we have all of this done, we want to go ahead and just set up some global resets for the default styles. So first we want to go ahead and select the HTML, the body, and the root div. And here we're going to go ahead and set the width to 100%, the height to 100%. We'll set our font family to Poppins, which is a sans serif font. We're going to set the background for our entire application to our background color we set up above. And we're going to set the primary color of the text to text primary. Next, we're going to set up a selector for star, star before, and star after. And inside, we're going to go ahead and say box sizing to border box. Then we want to make a selector for all elements. Inside here, we're going to make sure we set the margin to 0 for everything. Let's add a selector for our body element. Inside, we're going to set the line height to 1.5, and we're going to set -WebKit font smoothing to anti-aliased. Then we want to add a selector for image, picture, video, canvas, and SVG. Inside, we're going to make sure these types of elements are display block, and make sure they have a maximum width of 100%. Next, we want to add a selector for our input, our button, our text area, and select elements. Inside, we're simply just going to say font inherit. Next, we're going to go ahead and add a selector for all of our basic text elements. So P, H1, H2, H3, H5, and H6. Inside, we're going to make sure everything wraps properly. So we're going to say overflow wrap, break word. Now we're going to go ahead and start setting up some individual styles for different components. Starting out, let's go ahead and do H1. H1 should have a font size of 3 rem and a font weight of 900. Next, our H2. This has a font size of 2.5 rem and a font weight of 800. Then our H3 element with a font size of 2.25 rem and a font weight of 700. Next, our H4 elements with a font size of 2 rem and a font weight of 600. Next up is our H5 with a font size of 1.75 rem and a font weight of 600. Next, our H6, font size of 1.5 rem and a font weight of 600 again. And then finally, we have our P tag, which has a font size of 1.25 rem and a font weight of 400. So that should go ahead and set up a pretty nice looking hierarchy amongst our different text elements. Finally, we want to set up some styles for just overall utility classes that we're going to use amongst the application. First up, we're going to go ahead and create a utility class called .heightFull. Here we're going to set the height to 100%. Then we have a widthFull class. Inside here, we're going to set width to 100%. Then we're going to have a width half. Here, width will be 50%. Oh, width third class. Here, width will be 33%. And finally, we have a width quarter class, where you guessed it, the width will be 25%. Now we need to go ahead and set up a couple utilities for styling the entire application pages. So first, we'll go ahead and start out with a utility class called .page. Here, the width will be 100%, height will be 100%. We'll set display to flex. We want to set the flex direction and column. We're going to go and justify content to the flex start and align items to the center. The page itself is going to take up the entire space, but most websites don't actually take up a full page of width, so they actually need to take up like 80 or 90%. So to deal with that, we're going to also go ahead and create a class called page container. Inside, we'll set the width to 80% this time. height will fit the content height that we have inside of the page. But if the content doesn't take up a full page, we at least want the minimum height to be 100% of the viewport. We'll also set a small padding of about 1 rem around the entire page container. Once again, we'll set display to flex. We'll set flex direction to column again. We also want to go ahead and include a row gap of about 1.5 rem. Next, we need a specialized version of the page container that's going to center things for us. Let's go ahead and create a class page container center. Inside, the width will be 80% again. Height will be 100% again. Padding will be 1 rem. Set display to flex. Set flex direction to column. Justify content will be in the center. Align items will be in the center. And this one will have a row gap of 1 rem. Now we need to go ahead and set up a couple more general purpose classes and we'll finally wrap it up. The next general purpose class is going to be called .center. Inside of a width 100%, height 100%, display flex, justify content in the center, align items in the center, and a gap of 1 rem. Next, we want a utility class to place things in a row rather than in columns. So let's go ahead and set up a .row class. Inside, width is 100%, set display to flex. We want to justify content in the flex start. We want to align items in the flex start, and we want to set a small gap of 1 rem. Next, let's set up a utility class called column. Here, width will be 100% again. Display will be flex. We'll set flex direction to column. And we'll also have a gap of 1 rem again. Next, we want to create a utility class to flex and space out the elements. So let's go ahead and create one called space between. Once again, we'll have width 100%. Display will be flex. Justify content will be space between this time. We will align items in the center. And we'll have a gap of 1 rem. And then finally, we have one last utility class to set up for decorating text on hover. Let's go ahead and create a class called text hover, and we're going to use a :hover for the hovering effect. Inside, we'll set a cursor to pointer and a text decoration to underline. Let's go ahead and make sure this is saved so we don't accidentally lose anything. And now we'll go ahead and do it for the overall CSS for the application. I know that we went ahead and invested quite some time up front to set all of this up, but in the end, it will save us a ton of time in the long run, not having to rewrite a ton of CSS across a ton of different components inside of our application. Now that our global CSS is all fixed up, let's go ahead and hop into the app.tsx, and we need to go ahead and clear a lot of this stuff out. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everything inside the return. I'm also going to go ahead and get rid of this use state. We do not need any of these imports for now, and I think that should pretty much do it. Now we want to go ahead and hop into this return. We want to go ahead and start setting this up. The first thing we want to go ahead and set up inside of a return is a browser router, and this is going to go ahead and allow us to add the routes that we have inside of our component here or inside of our app. Let's go ahead and import that from React Router DOM. Inside of our browser router, we're going to go ahead and need a routes component, so that way we can set up all our different routes. Let's make sure we go ahead and import this as well. And inside of our routes, we'll go ahead and set up our first route. Once again, let's make sure we go and import this from our React Router DOM. And then we can go ahead and set up the information inside of the route. Inside of our route component, we're going to go ahead and have path equal to / and our element is equal to login page inside of a fragment. This is going to go ahead and be like the primary route or the primary page that we land on whenever we open up the application. Then we want to go ahead and declare another route component. We want to open this one up, and inside this route component, we want to go ahead and set the path to an empty string and element to fragments with layout page inside of it. Now we need to go ahead and add routes inside of this route specifically. Let's go ahead and declare another route here. Inside this route, we're going to go ahead and set the path to portal/admin and the element to a fragment with manage employees page inside. We need another route component again. Inside this one, we're going to go ahead and set the path to portal/admin/myself and the element to a fragment with manage self page. Let's set up our next route component. This route's going to be to the path of /portal/manager, and the element's going to be a fragment with manage reports page. We'll have another route. Here, we're going to go ahead and set the path to portal/manager/timesheets and an element of review timesheets page inside of fragments. We'll have yet another route component. Here we'll set the path to portal/manager/myself, and the element will be a fragment with manage self page. We'll set up our next route component. Inside, we'll set the path to portal/employee and element as fragments with manage self page. We'll have one final route component here. Here we'll go ahead and set the path to portal/employee/timesheets and the element as a fragment with timesheet page. So that should go ahead and do it for all of this. Now, to be able to actually view all of these different routes working inside of our application, we actually need to go ahead and create an outlet, or in our case, we're going to go ahead and call this a layout page to kind of have a more or less cohesive page to render each one of these other pages in and kind of format them all the same. So this page, this layout page, is basically going to have like the formatting of all of our pages whenever we get into the application. So we're going to end up having things like the navigation bar, footer, all of that stuff in there. So let's go ahead and deal with that before we hop into the application and make sure all of our routes are working properly. To go ahead and create this layout page, let's go ahead and make a new directory inside of our source directory. We're going to go ahead and call this pages. And then inside pages, we're going to go ahead and make another new file. And this is going to be layout page.tsx. We're also going to go ahead and make a new file as well. And this is going to be layout page.css. We want to go ahead and go into our layout page.tsx. The first thing we need to go and do at the top of our layout page.tsx is go ahead and import our layout page.css. Then we want to go ahead and declare our function here. So we're going to export default function layout page. For this component, we don't need to take in any props. So let's simply hop inside the component and set up a very quick return statement. Let's go ahead and return a div with a class name of layout page and page. And inside of our layout page component, we're going to set up an empty fragment with layout page. Below our layout page fragment, we want to go ahead and render an outlet component. Let's go ahead and make sure that we import this outlet component. That way it's actually going to work. This can come from React Router DOM. And that's all we really need to do for now for setting this up. Now let's go ahead and open up our layout page.css and make this layout page class here and style it. Inside of our CSS, let's go ahead and make the selector for our layout page class. Inside of our layout page, we're going to go ahead and have a height of fit content. We're going to have a minimum height of 100 VH. And we're going to have a background of var background. That should basically do it for all the styles we need for our layout page. So now all we need to go ahead and do is hop back into our app.tsx and actually render this inside of our app component. And then we should be able to actually view all of our routes as we expect. Now that we have the means to render the rest of our routes, let's go ahead and actually place this inside of our app component. So let's hop into app.tsx. And then we want to go ahead and find the route where we have the element, which is equal to a fragment layout page. Let's go ahead and delete this. And instead, let's go ahead and render the layout page. Let's make sure we go ahead and import our layout page. That way it is actually going to work and it's not going to go ahead and fail compiling. And that should go ahead and do it for our entire application. So now let's go ahead and actually run the app, hop into the browser and just see how it's looking like. So inside of our terminal, we're going to go ahead and say npm run dev. And this is going to go ahead and run a dev server of our Vite application. Let's go ahead and hit run. And then this is going to go ahead and start the application on localhost 5173. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and let's hop into the browser and take a look. So here inside the application, you're not going to be able to see much. You can just see in the top left corner, we just have a login page. If we go ahead and go to, for example, /portal/ and then we go to like, for example, admin. If we go ahead and do this, you can see layout page and then manage employees. If we go to portal/admin/myself, for example, you can go ahead and see manage self page. And then if we go to like portal/ and then manager/ this one went to the timesheets page. So we can see review timesheets. We go ahead and delete this. We can see manage reports. We can also go ahead and go to myself as well. So you can see manage myself page. We can also go ahead and go to employee/. And then once again, it's going to go to manage self page. And then we can also go to employee/timesheets. Hit enter, and it also has the timesheet page. So now that should basically be everything that's set up and ready to go. We'll go ahead and go through, work on all the other pages as we get going here. For the time being, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for where we're going to be at for our front-end application. That's going to go ahead and do it for the first chapter of the Spring Security Employee Management System course. In this chapter, we went over the project in general and went through the prerequisites needed before starting the course. After this, we talked over the requirements we're going to be implementing and give you a full tour of the finished application. Finally, we got our hands dirty setting up our skeleton Spring Boot application with a basic REST API for our employee, which we'll continue to expand upon, along with the simple React application, which we'll also continue to add features to as the course progresses. As mentioned earlier in the video, if you would like access to the entire course upfront, including all the code and materials which comes along with it, there are two options to achieve this. You can either purchase the course over at Udemy. I have a link in the description below. Udemy was setting the prices as they see fit for the content, but I will attempt to run as many coupons/promotions on the course as I can. The second option is to subscribe to the course level membership of my channel. This will grant you access to the entire course, plus access to the private GitHub repository with the code. This is a flat $15 and you only need to be a member for the single month while this course is out to gain access, and then you can go ahead and decline to renew anytime you see fit. Of course, if neither of these options work for you, I'll be incrementally uploading each chapter to YouTube, and you can follow along completely for free. The only thing I ask if you are following along is that you go ahead and like and comment on the video. It really helps out with the reach of the course. And if you want to see more programming content similar to this, I would highly recommend subscribing. With that being said, I hope you join me in the next chapter of the course. We will be adding in Spring Security to our application, along with configuring and adding all the logic that goes along with enabling our most basic form of authentication in Spring Security. We'll also be expanding our React application to use the new authentication to log in an employee and store information globally to use across the entire application. As always, this has been Ethan, or Unauthenticated. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video.